Welcome to Faith in 5, a weekly video devotional designed to discuss practical spiritual concepts in 5 minutes or less. I'm your host, Mark Vandella. Just a couple weekends ago, I was hanging out with one of my good friends, and they were telling us a story about their daughter who had a difficult student in her class. And she came home and said, this is really difficult. She's hard to engage with, and it's a lot. She's a new girl. So anytime there's the new person, right? So they're kind of trying to figure stuff out, and they're upsetting the comfort zone of all the existing students. And so there was this kind of just not getting along, right? They're colliding. And my friend said, I don't know where this came from, but I said, let's look at the Bible. And they read Philippians 8. And in Philippians 8, there's a portion of it that says, reflect on everything that's true and noble. And it says anything that's praiseworthy. And she picked up on that praiseworthy word, and she said, you know what I would challenge you to do to her daughter, she said, go back to school and look for the places that she is doing a good job, or the ways that she engages that you like, and then compliment those things. Really focus on the praiseworthy things. And then she said a couple days later, they were at dinner, eating dinner, and her daughter said, Mom, guess what? Today, other students were saying they have like a tree house, clubhouse kind of thing where they read together. And one of the other students said, hey, guess what? So-and-so did something praiseworthy today, and so I let her into the clubhouse to read. And my friend is now a self-proclaimed parent of the year. I mean, that's phenomenal, right? That it worked, and that these kids now are all kind of talking about looking for praiseworthy things within their classmates. I tell that story because, I'll be honest, as an adult, that'd be hard for me to do. I've worked with people that were frustrating, that were hard to deal with. And if I read that verse, I'd have been like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but probably not done anything about it. I regularly coach companies, teams, staff, whatever it is, and I run into this all the time where it's like, yeah, no, they've done one too many things to me. I don't think I'm going to focus on the praiseworthy. Yeah, I mean, there's some good there, but I'm only going to focus on the negative. And nobody says that out loud, but we continue to behave that way. Sometimes our faith is impacted by the fact that we are adults. In Blue Like Jazz, Donald Miller's book, he says that he realizes that there's this weird juxtaposition between adult and kid. And he said a lot of times as he grew up, he associated much of Christian doctrine, it says this in his book, with children's stories. He said so much of the Bible just to me was kids' stories, because I grew up in a church that they told us these kids' stories. They told us these real-life adult stories as kids' stories, and so it starts to feel like fairy tales. He said we talked about Noah and the ark because there were animals in it. But he said we always cut out the part. We failed to mention that this was when God kind of massacred all of humanity. Right? Like he says, this is the problem with their faith, is that we kind of make it into a Mother Goose fairy tale, and then it isn't real when it tries to apply to our lives. Like my friend, the parent of the year, that would be harder for her to implement in her job than it is for her kid to implement in school. Because we're adults. Right? And we have all this reasoning and all these things that get in the way. He said, Donald Miller goes on to say, it also confused me that some people would look at parts of the Bible, but not the whole thing. They ignored a lot of the obvious questions. Because adults, we break it down and we study it and we parse through it and we like to make it fit what we want. But as a kid, you just kind of read that. And I've heard so many stories from my friends where their kids will say, hey, that's not what the Bible says. Or what about that guy over there that, the Bible says we should help the homeless, but Mom and Dad, you just drove past that guy on the street corner. Right? Because we filter that through our adult smartness. And the Bible challenges us. In Matthew 18, 2-5, Jesus himself says, I promise you this. If you don't change and become like a child, you will never get into the kingdom of heaven. Oh, that's pretty powerful, right? Jesus says, if you are as humble as the child, you are the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And when you welcome one of these children because of me, you also welcome me. Jesus challenges us to have faith more like a child because it allows us to actually hear and see what God is trying to say rather than what we interpret it to say to make it better fit what we think and what we want to have happen. That what if we just took it and we understood, we studied and tried to figure out what is God trying to say, and then we went and applied it. That we could go and we could impact people. We could live out our faith as just clear, pure, and simple as a child. Donald Miller says in his book, he says, I think that the devil has tricked us into thinking that so much of the biblical theology is a story just fit for kids, that as adults, we don't live it out. And the Bible says the very opposite. This week, as you live out your faith, consider the places that you can learn from kids, that you can see things, and that you can put your adultness, the filters and the perspectives that you bring, that you could put those aside, put your pride aside, and live this out. Have faith like a child so that more people could see and know Jesus.